navy in the world. He spends a lot of his time in his garden shed with his 3 robotic telescopes. Or that's the excuse you give. Spotting, you're still after more supernovae, aren't you?
I'm certainly after them. Yeah, I'm after one at the moment because there's a little competition goes on worldwide to see who's the first astronomer to discover the first supernova in any given year.
Really?
Yeah, and everybody's looking for 2011A, and I'm amongst them, so I'm just hoping the weather forecast starts to improve, sir.
But we're lucky to get you out of your shed then.
Yeah, indeed.
But we should say his name is Tom Boles. He's the Vice President of the British Astronomical Society, and he's today's sofa guest. It's such a pleasure to meet you. I start off by saying my knowledge of space is tiny, so you're going to have to guide us through this. You're also responsible as the man who voted Pluto as a non-planet. What has Pluto ever done to you, Mr. Boles?
It wasn't just me. There was 200 other guys demoted Pluto down from not being a planet.
Why?
Well, it never really fitted into being a planet because Pluto does weird things. It's sort of its orbit isn't in the same plane as all the other planets. It's too small, and it's not the most distant planet. It's only the most distant planet some of the times. Some of the times it gets closer than Neptune, which sort of breaks all the rules. And what we discovered that there's hundreds and hundreds of other objects in its same orbit. There are just hundreds of Plutos around. So it just couldn't carry on being a planet. A planet needs to have its own orbit.
Because when I pitched the planets up there, I pitched them as you learnt them at school in different sort of coloured balls. That it doesn't really look like that, does it?
It does look like that.
Does it look like that?
It does. They start small as you start from the Sun. Mercury and Venus gets bigger, and then there's Earth. And then we get, Mars is, I guess, the exception. It gets a bit smaller. But then Jupiter and Saturn start to get smaller. So it's actually almost a cigar shape when you look at it. And Mars is the exception.
Now that's a fine Suffolk accent you're boasting there.
Yep, I've been practicing.
I take it you're not normally from this area?
Nope, I've only been in Suffolk for nearly 11 years.
And what was it that brought you down here?
Suffolk's wonderful. Well, where else would I like to be in the world that's like Suffolk? It's the best county in England.
Is it good for... we know that, but especially good for stargazing.
It's amazing for stargazing. First of all, we get less cloud in Suffolk than anywhere else in the country. You know, the further east you go in the country, there's less and less cloud. So the whole of East Anglia is good for the lack of cloud at night. And the other thing that Suffolk's particularly good at is it's not been spoiled. There's very little light pollution around. And so that means, you know, that the skies don't get glazed over, they'll get misty. And I can look further and further into space. I mean, some of the supernovae I look at are sort of 400 million light years away. Now, that's a huge distance. And they're very, very faint, the ones I look at, and light pollution would just wipe them out for me.
Okay, so what is a supernova?
Right, a supernova is a star at the end of its life. You know, what happens is, when a star's born, it's nothing other than just a big ball of hydrogen gas that contracts under gravity. The gravity heats the gas up, and this gas starts to fuse into helium. And that's what our sun's doing at the moment. It's fusing hydrogen into helium. It's a big nuclear reactor. Now that's fine. Well, the heat from the nuclear fusion is fighting against the gravity, but eventually a star will run out of energy and it'll start to cool. And when that happens, the gravity wins. So what happens? The gravity squashes the star, and the centre of the star is made of iron by this time, and then the iron core of the star compresses, bounces back, and the star just blows itself apart. And depending on the size of the star, we might get a black hole in the middle. And the black hole is things that everybody's interested in at the moment. They're very interesting.
What is a black hole?
A black hole is something which is so dense, small and heavy,
It sounds a bit like me so far.
Light can't get out, you know?
Okay.
Now, if you can imagine yourself standing, you bounce the ball into the air. You can throw a ball up 5 feet, it'll come back down. Throw it 10 feet, it'll come back down. The faster you throw the ball, the higher it'll go up. Now, the fastest you could throw anything in the universe is the speed of light. Well, a black hole is so heavy that you can't even get light out of it because the escape velocity out of the black hole is faster than the speed of light is.
You see, my brain, as anyone listening to this programme knows, is small. I just can't get into the size, the numbers, the hugeness, the 200. How do you do that? You
don't. Even after years and years of being an astronomer, you don't. You just come to terms with it and you start to accept it. Because if you start thinking about it too much, the human brain is just not capable of doing it. So if you want to treat it, you need to treat it mathematically and sort of think just to imagine the whole size of the universe. If we look at our Milky Way is a typical galaxy. It has about 200 billion stars in it.
200 billion.
There are probably another 200 billion galaxies that we can see using our largest telescopes today. Now you do the sums on that, and that means that there are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on every beach on Earth. Just think about that for a minute. You can't think of that number. That's a silly number.
Think that's silly.
Yeah, it's just a huge, huge number.
But when it finishes, what's outside of it?
There's nothing outside
But
of it.
how can that be, Tom?
Because you need to define nothing. And we think of nothing being mere humans as being space.
Yeah.
But space isn't nothing. Space is space. Space actually exists. Space is made up of little virtual particles that come in and out of existence all the time. And you actually need to create space to have it. And outside of that, there's not even space. And you need to get your brain around that. And that takes a little bit of thinking.
You know, when you do this, does it make you think, I am just a tiny speck, or does it make you think what a privilege it is to be part of this planet at this time, to be a sentient being in this huge universe? Does it make you feel quite important, or does it make you feel insignificant?
It does both. It makes me feel very insignificant, but it makes me privileged to be able to do this. I mean, it's one of the motivators for doing it, because, you've got that universe up there, which, 99.99% of humans' lifespan is being ignored. There's very few people actually paying attention to the universe outside the planet at the moment. As a percentage of the population. And it's such an important environment we're living in. And so it's a tremendous motivator just to be able to touch it, in a metaphorical sense, and appreciate what's out there.
Because this is with the stargazing ride. Were you involved in that at all with the British?
I was involved in the early days, putting some of the programs together, and I did some of the consultancy for it, but I didn't appear on it.
I mean, to my mind, it was genius, and you thought, well, why aren't we learning this at school? Why aren't we having lessons in it? And we're learning citizenship and cookery and how to make cheese straws. We should be learning this.
It's back down to science and maths, isn't it? I mean, the number of people at school who get involved really deeply in science and maths is decreasing. And it's really very difficult to get good science and maths teachers. If you go into any school, they'll tell you those are the hardest teachers to get. And so science is quite a difficult subject to teach. And if you start to get into subjects like astronomy, they really need help. They need help to actually teach the astronomy that they're doing. And I get involved in local schools, going and giving the kids talks on astronomy, and you should see their eyes light up. And if you could manage to let these people look through a telescope, the first time they look at a telescope, they look at Saturn, and you can see the little faces light up and say, wow. And I've had kids run around the front of a telescope to see if I've stuck a slide on the front, to see if I've cheated.
Yeah.
They look at Saturn and they say, that's not real.
But when you started in the 50s or in the 60s, that must have been the heyday of the space, the war, the Soviet Union. That everyone wanted to be astronauts. It was huge, and then it just seems to have fizzled out. No one wants to be an astronaut anymore. They want to appear in closer.
Yeah, I think they all would like to be an astronaut. But I guess the motivation, there was loads of motivation in the 50s and the 60s, because if you think everything that happened, I mean, Sputnik 1 went up in 1957, and then the Sky at Night started in 1957. April 1957 was Patrick Moore's first television appearance, and that was just serendipitous. Because the two of them just happened to be there at the same time, and of course that's why the programme took off. But there's loads of things happened then. I went to Glasgow University when I was 15, 16, and I met this very lovely professor who gave me lessons in his class on astronomy, and I wasn't supposed to be there, but he got me involved in learning astronomy and doing astronomy, and he sent me down to Glasgow University Observatory one night, and there was a satellite put up called Echo 1, which was a big silver balloon. It was long before Sky put their satellites up, and long before Telstar. This was just a big passive balloon that they used to bounce signals off. And what happened, we were tracking it across the sky, myself and half a dozen other astronomers from Glasgow University, and it got hit by a meteor. the very night we were looking at it, and it made tremendous news. Now, that's tremendous motivation for a 15-year-old. BBC television came round with the black and white cameras, as they were at the time, and I think I was on the news about 5 times that night, and I watched every episode of the BBC News that after it. I watched over and over and over again.
What was your first telescope then? Was it a tiny little one you hold to your eye like that?
Oh, much smaller than that. My first telescope was made from toilet rolls. Say it was like Jack and Wine. You get a toilet roll and you tape them together, and then you go down to the local opticians and you beg a lens off them, which you stick to the front, and then you go through all the junk you've got in the house to find another magnifying glass for the other end. But it's remarkable what you can see with those things, and it's things that kids could do at school as projects.
Do you think if the governments that, we still had the Soviet Union, you still had, Kennedy and America, that we would have got further in the space exploration than we have done?
Yeah, I think we went to the moon for all the wrong reasons. But I think it was a tremendous feat for mankind to go to the moon. And I think mankind should be proud of it. I think mankind should be ashamed of itself that it hasn't gone back to the moon since then. I mean, think of the period it's gone since then. So really, we're capable of doing it, but we went there just because it was a race for the against the Soviets.
Yeah, but it still got us there, though.
It still got us there. There's a lot of good science come out of it, a lot of good industry come out of it, but it's starting to quieten down now.
All righty, we are talking some more space with our sofa guest today. His name is Tom Boles. He is, I would say you're a local astronomer and also the Vice President of the British Astronomical Association, and had been involved in this BBC Two Stargaze Live, which was just tremendous, which was on our boxes and last few nights. We were just chatting there about how one of your many accolades. You've written books with Patrick Moore, you've done all sorts of things, you made sure Pluto was no longer a planet, is that you discover supernovas, and you were just saying there you discovered one when you were in the pub. Not when you staggered out of the pub.
Not when I staggered out. I promised to go down to a birthday party which had been held in the pub, and it was one of those nights that was so crystal clear I just couldn't avoid but having a shot at it and setting the telescopes up. So what I did is I set the telescopes up and I put the longest search programs on them I could possibly put on. I got the 3 telescopes were all running with each of them with 3-hour search programs on it. Then I went to the pub. When I got back from the pub, I sat and analysed all the data that the telescopes had collected, and there it was. There was a supernova that I didn't discover it while I was at the pub, but I imaged it while I was at the pub. Then I came back and found it. So, I'm proud of that. That's an achievement as well.
That went on your tally?
That went on my tally.
And now you're 138, and we're all after the first one for 2000. So who's the second, who's your main supernova hunting rival?
Well, anybody. There's huge, big professional surveys all over the world looking for supernovae. Even the Hubble telescope looks for supernovae nowadays because they try to get really faint ones. And it could be anybody, but luckily, we're having bad weather here, but even California's having bad weather at the moment. So California and Arizona's having a tough time. So if it could just clear here in the next couple of days, I would be in with a chance. But fingers crossed.
In other words, you've got the Hubble, you've got all these huge telescopes that we saw on the telly last night in Hawaii, and really the supernova spotting spot is a back garden in Suffolk.
Indeed. But
I'd love that with your telescopes.
No, there's some things that I can do more economically than big telescopes can do. I mean, big telescopes cost a fortune to run. The time on them is invaluable. So they don't really want to waste their time looking for supernovae.
Oh, okay.
You could search for a long time and not find anything. It'd be a waste of telescope time. So I give them a service. I find a supernova for them. I give them the information. They do the follow-up on it and tell me what kind of supernova it is. They tell me things like the speed that the explosion is taking place at. And it's a real turn-on. I mean, that's part of the motivation. I've had this Hubble Space Telescope follow up in my supernova. It's quite nice to wake up in the morning and find out, the Hubble Space Telescope's going to work to help you out. It's kind of done something. And the 2 big Keck telescopes have followed out my supernova. And there's a huge telescope in New Mexico called the Large Array. And it's a radio telescope. It's the largest telescope in the world. That's followed up. And, it's really good fun.
So at night, when most of us are stumbling around, just, going home from work, the first thing you're looking at is how bright is that night sky and what you're going to see tonight?
How dark is that?
How dark is that sky?
That's how you want it. A really dark sky. And whether it's clear and if the sky is steady. And that's where Suffolk comes in again. So where I am in Suffolk, I'm not too far away from the sea, so we get just a tad little bit of sea mist which stabilises the atmosphere, and it makes the stars appear like pinpoints in the sky, and they don't dance around the way they would do perhaps further inland or where the temperature's a lot higher. And it really helps me to get good images.
What's your biggest gee whiz moment in all of your astronomical career?
The biggest gee whiz moment was one supernova that I discovered way back in 2003. And when I discovered it, it was the second brightest supernova ever discovered in history. It was certainly the brightest radio supernova ever discovered in history. And that's one that we had follow-ups all over the world with that. The Large Array in New Mexico got it. Those 3 satellites in the sky got involved. There was a probe on its way to Mars, which had a sad ending, as it turned out. But it all tuned in to try and prove that supernova that I discovered was associated with a thing called a gamma ray burster. A gamma ray burster is a huge explosion in the sky which emits quite dangerous radiation, and it's only the biggest supernovae that actually produce these things. And they finally proved that, not conclusively, but they proved there was a 90% chance that the supernova I discovered was associated with this gamma ray burster.
So take us back to when you're knocking out your first telescope with the loo rolls and the lens. Then did you go on to study? You must have done physics or astronomy, or did you do it almost as a hobby?
Did it always as a hobby. I did go and work in a telescope shop in Glasgow at one time, and I learned how to make telescopes professionally. So that did help, because I made my own lenses, I made my own mirror, I ground up a 6-inch diameter mirror from my first telescope. So all of these things added, but I've never ever done it professionally.
What was the time that got you hooked on it? Do you remember a certain time?
Precisely. It was late in the afternoon, and it was a Friday night. I can remember that. And I went to school, and this other guy in the class brought in a next government 2-inch diameter naval telescope, and he says, "Who wants to look at the stars through this?" And of course, 5 o'clock in Scotland, in Glasgow, middle of winter, pitch black. And so we sat up, and he showed me Saturn, and my little legs went all wobbly. You know, oh, that's lovely, wow. And then the same night, because it was sort of, it was January, February, I think, he swung the telescope round and he showed me the Seven Sisters. And I was addicted. You know, if you can get somebody kind enough to do that to you, let you see something as wonderful as Saturn, and then show you the Seven Sisters, you know, within minutes of each other. No, there's no way you can't be interested in astronomy. You know, astronomy should come with a public health warning, because, you know, once you get involved in it, you just can't give it up. It's such a magical subject.
So in your mind, to get you really hooked, it's seeing Saturn and the rings of Saturn and, yeah. As
a boy.
Yes.
But no, as you move up, you sort of, that gets the hooks into you, and then you start to think, what's really out there? And you want to go further and further and further. And you try to go out as far out into space as you can, and then that turns other things on, like, you know, looking for supernovae. Because the nice thing about supernovae is that they start to tie in with cosmology, and right at the forefront of modern cosmology. I mean, most people know that the universe is expanding. Now, just at the beginning, at the end of the last century, about 1998, I think it was, they discovered that the universe was not only expanding, it was accelerating. And that was big breaking news at the time. And that's all down to supernovae. And what they're doing now is they're using supernovae discovered by people like me, which was relatively close supernovae, to calibrate the big instruments like the Hubble Space Telescope and the 2 big kegs to get their readings and their measurements more precise. So that's the sort of contribution you're making. You're making a contribution to real science just by discovering these things.
Wow. What will happen to our humble little planet?
Our humble little planet.
Will we all blow up? Will we get a meteor? No. What will happen to us?
Only the biggest stars in the universe go supernovae. The big massive stars, and there's another type of supernovae, but it wouldn't apply to our sun. Our sun is actually a dwarf star, would you believe? It's what they call a yellow dwarf. And it will probably live for something like 12 billion years. And it's about halfway through its lifestyle at the moment. And we should be very, very grateful that it is such a dwarf star. A star is it's the opposite of a coal fire. If you could imagine sticking a lot of coal in the fire, the more coal you put on, the longer the fire will burn. It's the opposite of stars. If you put a lot of hydrogen into a star, it glows hotter. If it gets hotter, the nuclear processes go faster, and the star dies quicker. So if our star had been a big star, we wouldn't be around to have this interview today.
What about a meteor that you wiped out the dinosaurs? Are we online for one of them?
Yes, we could be in line with one of them, or a comet. And it's one of the things that it's very important actually to the evolution of the human race. But we've started to realise that things like that can actually happen to us. And it's whether we are mature enough politically and economically to actually handle something like that. Because, let's face it, it's something that's remotely has no chance to happen in anybody's lifetime. The probability of it happening is very, very low. But the effect of it happening, the catastrophe of it, is very, very high. And so how do you handle something like that? Governments come in, they're in power for 4 or 5 years. Why should they worry about what's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years? Let's get my term in government over and we'll move on from there. So there isn't the will at the moment to actually spend a lot of money on that. But NASA has started to do a space watch effort, and they're starting to map all of potentially large asteroids in the sky that can damage the Earth. So that's a great first step.
When you're looking at your telescope, does it make you think, oh, there is a God, or does it make you think, nah? Does it affect you in a sort of spiritual way, or
no?
Nothing. It
depends on your definition of spiritual.
Yeah.
I'm not a deist, and I don't find any need in the universe to have a God. Having a God doesn't solve any problems, not if you're a scientist. And if you have a God, then you need to start explaining, or I would feel the need to start explaining what happened before then. I'm a humanist, and I'm a member of the Suffolk Humanists as well. And this is the sort of conversations that we have, and it's quite lonely having thoughts like I have, because you're in the minority, and sometimes you can feel as though you're the odd person out. But it's, once you've made your mind up, it's a hard decision to make. It takes a lot more courage not to believe in a God than it does to believe in one.
Yeah, and the other thing I have to ask, what about life on other planets? Are we?
No, that's an easy one after all that. Well, remember these grains of sand that we spoke about?
Yeah, that's a lot.
200 billion stars in our galaxy. I mean, if you just look at that number, there's got to be planets. Well, at the moment, the way we think planets are formed, it will be the exception to find a star without planets around it. That's the belief at the moment. Stars get created out of big stellar nebulae, which forms planets around the stars. And to get a star that's formed itself so precisely that it hasn't formed planets will be the exception. Now you just look at all of those stars and think back and say to yourself, we're just an ordinary little planet sitting around an ordinary little star. If you look at where we are in our own galaxy, we're not even in a very, very special place in the galaxy. Yet all of the universe is full of these potential stars ready to make planets and to make life. And I'm confident there's life there. I can't prove it as a scientist. I can't say yes or no, there's life there.
But the probability.
From the probability and the mathematics of it, yes.
What, I mean, like little green men, Doctor Who type planet?
Not necessarily. It depends on the environment. I mean, if you look at the Earth has got so much different life on it. And some of the life does look quite grotesque to us, the life that's living on Earth. If you go down to Antarctica, you can find life living inside solid rock. So life tries to exist. There's something in the universe which makes life try to form from the chemical elements. And life is almost inevitable. So to say that we are special, well, we are special, of course we're special, but to say that we're unique, is not really acceptable.
It's not acceptable. Have you got any ambitions left in your career in astronomy? Do you want to, can we send you up in a spacesuit?
You can send me that. I don't think NASA would support that.
Oh, we would get you in the International Space Shuttle. Would you like something like that?
We'd like listeners to start a sort of petition.
Yeah,
sell Tom Boles up.
Tom, we'll get you up there. I mean, that would be incredible, wouldn't it? Or are you just you're happy just to keep going with your super...
You send me up there, I'll take a picture and I'll come back and I'll show you when I've done it, okay? Now, I'm happy to carry on with my supernova, as long as I'm enjoying doing it. And enjoying is the key word. You need to enjoy what you're doing. And that's why all different people involved in astronomy all do it for different reasons. But you need to enjoy it. When I stop enjoying it, I'll just give it up. It's as simple as that, and I won't do it anymore. But as long as the motivation's there, I'll keep doing it.
But do you have to switch your brain off every now and again and start thinking about the plot for EastEnders? Or because otherwise you go bonkers, wouldn't you? If you're thinking on that scale the whole time.
Yeah, there's enough interference in life. I don't need to go as far as the plot in EastEnders, I'm afraid. But there's a lot of things happening in life to keep me sane. I don't worry about that.
Well, I tell you what, you've opened my eyes, and it just makes you want to get more involved and to learn more. And we have got online a stargazing feature on the BBC homepage, which is www.bbc.co.uk/Suffolk, which is when Andrew Woodger came to visit you and your telescopes, if you recall that.
Yes, he did, and he took some very nice pictures.
And also the stargazing feature and our local events guide on the homepage mention the star party events in Christchurch this Saturday and Sunday, which I have got written down here, which I can't wait to see this. Star party being held in Christchurch Park, organised by the Park Rangers and the Orwell Astronomical Society, 8th of January between 7 and 9, £3, and you just go along and look through telescopes. Are you involved in the educational side of it?
I do a lot of outreach for schools and for clubs and different public groups that are interested in astronomy. I mean, that particular astronomical society is a very friendly astronomical society, and we're just past Christmas, so everybody's got brand new probably telescopes for Christmas. They haven't taken them out of the box, and they probably don't know how to use them or put them together. Dive on your Orwell Astronomical Society, and they'll be friendly. They'll show you what to do, and you'll have a Christmas present you'll be able to use forever.
Yeah, but you have really sort of set our imaginations on fire. Thank you so much for coming in, and good luck with the first supernova of 2011.
Thank you for having me.
We need a cloud-free environment.
Cloud-free environment for just one night would do.
And you to go to the pub.
And for me to go to the pub.
Thanks so much. That's Tom Boles, who was our sofa guest there. He is a local astronomer and also the Vice President of the British Astronomical Association. And if you're glued to BBC's Stargazing Live and you want to get involved yourself, as we said, there's a star party being held in Christchurch Park. Details for that, if you go on to the Ipswich Borough Council website, www.ipswich.gov.uk.